favored Esau. But she also knew that as soon as Yitzchak opened his mouth, he'd be a false prophet, delivering a false prophecy.
Oh, yeah.
And so rather than Jacob setting all this up and selling the birthright and all this nonsense, it was the mother the wife looking out for her husband, passing on a false prophecy and establishing a false Kohen against the will of Yahweh. Watch this. Watch this. It is told. She determined, Rivka, determined to save Yitzchak's neck by making Yitzchak come into line with Yahweh's word, a heroic act on her part. So the act of her, and we're going to read this in a second, Genesis 27:1, and we're going to read this as we go along. Rather than this being an act of deception with Yakkov and Rivka against Isaac, Yitzchak, this was a spiritually discerning wife protecting her husband from Yahweh's judgment. We should all have women like that. We should all have husbands like that, protecting us from doing silly things that will lead to Yahweh's judgment in our lives. And many of us are blessed to have those kind of spouses. Now go down to verse 5, the plot. Let's look at the plot. So there was an error here. The error is that Yaakov stole the birthright from a dying brother. Did he steal it? No, he sold it. It was a legitimate transaction. A. B. Not only was it a legitimate transaction, Esau wasn't dying, he was lazy, faint. He was lazy to go out and get food, so he saw that bowl and his eyes lusted after the pottage. He was not dying of starvation or any such thing. That was a legitimate transaction in any court of jurisprudence. I know that's a fancy word, but that's like Judge Wagner's court. Those fancy words sometimes get intimidating. Reminds me of the old pastor story. You know, he knows he has a good sermon, but there are certain parts of his sermon that are weak. So in his notes it says, right, bang pulpit here. At the weakest point of his message, so it doesn't look silly, his notes say, bang pulpit here. And boy, I've done that before. When you guys didn't know that I didn't know what I was talking about, but I didn't want you to know that I didn't know what I was talking about, but I wanted you to think that that I didn't know what I was talking about, even though I didn't know what I was talking about, in order to make you think that I didn't know what I was talking about, I used to go, hey, poor heart, turn to your neighbor, oh, jumping Yakkov, you know? Shimon says, turn to your neighbor. A lot of times I do that because this is the time to bang pulpit. But I'm sitting down, I have no pulpit to bang. Shh, but don't tell anybody, there's only hundreds of people listening. Bereshit 27:5. And Rivka heard, now don't miss this. Rivka heard when Yitzchak, let's read from the RSTNA 27:5. Rivka heard when Yitzchak spoke to Esau, his son, and Esau went into the field to hunt for venison to bring it. And Rivka spoke to Yaakov, her son, saying what? See, I heard your Abba speak to Esau, your brother, saying, bring me venison and make my tasty meat, that I may eat and bless you before Yahweh, before my death. Now therefore, my son, obey my voice according to that which I command you. Go to the flock, get me from there 2 tov kids of the goats, and I will make them tasty meat for your Abba, such as he loves. And you shall bring it to your Abba that he may eat, that he may bless you before his death. And Yaakov said to his Ima, see, Esau, my brother, is a hairy man, and I am a smooth man. My Abba will feel me, and I shall seem to him as a deceiver. There he is. So not only is Yaakov not a deceiver, he's worried about even being perceived as a deceiver, because he's an honest, perfect man in the eyes of Yahweh. My Abba will feel me, and I will seem to him as a deceiver, and I will bring a curse upon me and not a bracha. And his Ima said to him, upon me be your curse, Yaakov, my son. Only obey my voice and go get them for me. He went and took and brought those goats to his imah, and his imah made tasty meat such as his what? Abba loved. Now let's talk. Go back to these words. My father will perceive me, he'll feel me and perceive me as a deceiver. He was afraid of being perceived as a deceiver because the truth here was that Rebekah was the deceiver, not Jacob. But slow down, we're going to get to her in a second. Rivkah was the deceiver, not Yakkov. Make sense? Yes. He was scared to act as a deceiver. He didn't want that to be attached to his integrity and to his character. It are misled Christians and misled Muslims and people of the world that think Yaakov lived in deception and crafty and cunningness, and nothing is further from the truth. Todah Rabba Yahweh. I said Todah Rabba Yahweh. You said Todah Rabba Yahweh. We said Todah Rabba Yahweh for setting us free. Now watch this. Rivkah was a deceiver. But she was also Yitzchak's wife. She was one flesh with Yitzchak. She cared about Yitzchak. She did what was best for Yitzchak. Rivkah was adamant in her plan, and she was right. So not only was she obeying Yahweh to preserve the covenant with Yaakov, she was stopping her husband from being a false prophet, installing a Kohen over the house of Yahweh that Yahweh hadn't chosen. Does any of this make sense? Baruch Hashem Yahweh. Couldn't Rivkah have told her husband, reminding Isaac of the word that Yahweh gave her regarding the twins? Isaac, listen, had just promised Esau the blessing, telling him to make delicious meals. A delicious meal. Yitzchak loved Esau because of the food. Let's read this together. Bereshit 25:28. Bereshit 25:28. Yitzchak loved who? Esau because of the food. He did eat of his venison. But Rivkah loved Yaakov. You see that? Rivkah was never consulted by Isaac in his decision to bless Esau. She overheard the conversation and acted the right way. Look, Yitzchak loved Esau because he was the covenant man of Yahweh. Is that what it says? His flesh loved Esau because Esau was feeding his flesh. That's not a reason to break Yahweh's covenant. And Rivkah comes in and sustains Yahweh's covenant, making sure that Yahweh's covenant was not broken, out of love for her husband and the perpetuity of the covenant through her son. So Rivkah, if anything, was a deceiver, but her motives were good because her husband was walking according to the flesh and she was walking according to Kol Amar Yahweh. So who's the deceiver here? The mother. But what's her motive? To preserve the covenant of Yahweh. She was saving her husband's neck, is what she was doing. Baruch Hashem Yahweh. Now the lie. Go with me to Bereshit. Bereshit 27:14. And he went and took and brought them to his mother, his imah, and his imah made tasty meat, such as his Abba loved. And Rivkah took nice clothing from her elder son Esau, which were in the Bayit, and put them upon Yaakov, her younger son. And she put the skins of the kids of the goats upon his hands and upon the smooth parts of his neck. And she gave the tasty meat in the lechem, which she had prepared, into the hand of her son Yaakov. And he came to his Abba and said, "My Abba." And he said, "Hineni, who are you, my son?" Verse 19. Yaakov said to his Abba, "I am Esau, your Bachor. I have done according as you have told me. Please rise, sit, eat of my venison, that your being may bless me." And Yaakov said to his son, how is it that you have found it so quickly, my son?